So this morning, we're happy to have our CEO and co-founder of the Chamber to talk to us about Is the Trend Your Friend? And Trevor, over to you on that note.
All right, thank goodness you reminded me of what the topic is, because I don't have any friends, so I go out looking for trends that I can turn into my friends. But I think what I'll do is just give you an indication of what my daily life is like. Let's see if I can share a screen. Somewhere along the lines, I will try and find for you one of my browser windows. Which clearly I can't find because I've got 48 browser windows open. So I'm not going to be able to share that because we will get back. Okay, so I'm not going to bring those up because it's going to take time for me to go through all those browser windows. But I think in terms of is the trend your friend, where I'm spending a lot of my time at the moment is analyzing what economists and people who seem to be in the know in the financial sectors around the world are actually thinking about the current times. And if I could give you a description of the type of browser windows that I have open and that I've been working on, because I've only been back for about 3 odd weeks, I think. And what are we now? The first week in February is gone. In a couple of weeks, 2021 will be gone. Things are going so fast that we've got to try and work out where do we position ourselves. So a couple of the browser windows that I've got open go back to these particular times right now in the world, global economy after COVID-19 and all the things that we experienced in 2020. How do they compare back to the 1920s? So I went back and had a look at a couple of charts, and what you can see is in terms of economic cycles, you can see price to earnings ratios all the way back from 19. So do yourself a favor, go and Google a comparison between the 1920s through to the 2020s. And that will give you an indication of what happened post the First World War, then the Second World War, because the question we should be asking is, I mean, COVID-19 is a disaster for a great number of people. Having said that, those people that have got free cash and wealth and money around it certainly hasn't been a disaster. Their incomes have just ballooned through the roof. So trying to work out, okay, what are these trends that we got to start thinking about over the next 10 years, and what have we got to be doing right now? And to me, I love the charts and I love working with the trends. And some of them, if you go and do a comparison, you'll see that it doesn't matter how big the disaster, there's always a recovery, but there are always people who lose out big time, and there are always the few who make big money out of these big swings. Right now, you'll see that our price to earnings ratios on the US markets are pretty high. I think we're looking at an average PE ratio of around 33 price to earnings ratios across the average of all companies, which is pretty high. But if you really go back and have a look at what happened from early 1920s to 1929, when the big crash came, these PE ratios went from high to super high. So it says that maybe we're at a time right now where the markets are going to, and they're boiling and frothing right now, but they're really going to boil and froth, and big things are going to happen. And it's almost as though the picture I get in my mind is of two different retail stores. We've got a choice as to which retail store we want to go into. The one store has got thousands of people lining up to try and get into that store, and the other store is empty. But they're the only two stores that you can choose. Which one do you want to go into? And I think it's basic human nature to turn around and say, well, what the hell's going on at that store where thousands of people are lining up trying to get in there, and we tend to ignore the one where there are no people around. So I think this is the trend, your friend, is a topic that reminds me, I'm a counter trend kind of guy. Some people just call me full of tripe because I don't tend to go where the crowds go. But right now I'm having to turn around to myself and saying, well, look, if you're in business, you want to make money from the people who are prepared to spend. And despite what we tend to see in the marketplace, at the moment we saw that liquidations in South Africa, I think there were over 1,000 business liquidations over the last 3 months in South Africa. If you go back and have a look at the trends for the last 25 odd years, because we get some pretty good statistics there, just go and do 25 years business liquidations, you'll see they have just meandered somewhere between 150 to about 400 per month business liquidations, no major change. But you talk to people, especially those people that are sitting in that store that have got no one queued up there, they're crying at the moment because they are bonded to the hilt. They are using every last cent to try and get some business on the go. People who are in business and not seeing the money coming in as a result of what's happening with COVID are absolutely crying. And one of the things that we should pick up from that particular social trend, especially here in South Africa, is try and keep yourself out of debt, especially in a frothy, boiling market, because those consumers can disappear overnight. So one of the things I like to add into that is, and I like to share with our team, is how do we get into business to maximize upside and minimize downside? And for me, what 2020 taught us, and there's Ivan. I have to take my cap off to Ivan every time I actually see him, because when COVID hit us, and these groups of people who were coming to meetings, business networking meetings, to have a cup of coffee and talk business and maybe sell a little widget every now and then. The moment COVID hit last year, people's businesses were annihilated. You talk to Dawn and Dawn Coulson, Dawn Olivier, who she will tell you the conference industry and anyone that is involved in, and there's Jasper as well, anyone in conferencing, these businesses were closed overnight, where business is always tough. Imagine what it's like to have no opportunity of business or people come into you. Have a look at the travel industry right now. Have a look at just all of those people that are involved in conferencing, even speakers, public speakers, their business dried up absolutely overnight. So what do you do in an environment like this, especially when people are turning around and saying, no, this is not the only virus that's going to be coming along. There are going to be new variants. There are going to be many more new things happening in the world. What is the trend? What is the social trend? Well, for me, I want to make the social trend my friend. I don't want to get into overheads. I love the idea that technology has suddenly, this COVID-19 has pushed this remote work from home, just like this technology, way ahead of its time. It would have taken us 10 years to actually be doing this thing in South Africa. It took us about 10 hours. And there was Ivan turning around, and when we all turned around and said, okay, now what do we do? We've got no one to talk to here locally in Johannesburg. So within, I think it was about 10 days, we started talking to people around the world. Immediately, our little focus here around a little geographic location became the entire world. And to wrap up that, and most of you will know, all of a sudden, Ivan started becoming a host. We did Wisdom's Chats on a daily basis, little groups like this, then going out to the Wisdom's Global Summit, then the trade, virtual trade fair, both for Africa and for global. And then through to, and I can see Jasper's going to step in and kick me off because he wants people to have a chat soon. But by the end of the year, while I was away in the bush, sorry about that, Ivan, he was busy producing, and I think he produced about 2,887 websites for the BBX show, which effectively reaches 90,000 businesses. So what do you do? We also talked about the one thing that really fascinates me with these economists overseas is this cryptocurrency and digital currencies and how they've been set up. And I'm looking at the argument between Nouriel Roubini of the New York University and Max Kaiser, who seems to be his arch enemy. He has a program on Russia Today. And the one is such a superior, no, they are great minds. So Nouriel Roubini going to that one, and Max Kaiser, his arch nemesis. It's almost as though these two guys hate each other. But it's fantastic to see them pitting themselves against each other. They both believe that we are entering into a period of frothy, bubbling. In fact, they are perhaps, Max Kaiser is calling for the collapse of the dollar and all currencies and all that sort of thing. I can't really see that because I don't think world economies allow that to happen. And Nouriel Roubini says, no, this is going to happen over 10 odd years. The other guy says almost 10 weeks. But there's a difference between these two guys. The one guy has a pile of Bitcoin in his back pocket, and by a pile, I'm talking in the tens of thousands to 50 thousands of these things. And I don't know if anyone has seen what the latest value of Bitcoin is. I think it's around, what did I see? About $39,300 or dollars per Bitcoin. And I remember just 10 years ago, people were giving away Bitcoin if you were playing games. And anyone who managed to collect a couple of Bitcoin, these things are now in Rand terms, they're well over R500,000 per Bitcoin. And it's quite interesting, the discussions on the go. And what really stimulated my thinking as to, hey, in my 67th year here, where do I want to be playing for the next 10 years? Well, I see youngsters. I've got a 12-year-old over here who came to me and said, hey, look at this thing called GameStop, because we were in New York. I didn't even see the store, but she was interested in it. And she said, look at these GameStop people. They're buying these shares, they're going through the roof. And she's telling me about GameStop in New York, and that all these youngsters have come together and they're out to actually take on the banks. What is this telling us about social trends? I think what's happening in the marketplace right now is protect your downside, maximize your upside. And in Wisdom's Chats, we've been talking about this thing. If you don't have a ticket, you can't enjoy the ride. This guy, Max Kaiser, didn't just have a ticket. He's got in the 10s, 20s, 30s, 40, 50,000 tickets in the form of Bitcoins, which the people are turning around and saying, tell us when you're a trillionaire, because they believe he's now a billionaire just based on his Bitcoin valuation. And how many Bitcoin have I got? Squat. My daughter's got. But I've got squat. I don't know how many of you have got. And now you've got to start having a look at, well, for goodness sake, when will this thing crash? And when it does crash, should I climb into this thing? So what are the trends doing? Where is all the money going? And perhaps part of these social trends, what I just want to throw in here in my thinking is that I think why I believe we've got a period, a good period of a couple of years, and that we will almost follow exactly the same pattern as the 1920s to 1929, that I think this pot is going to boil more and more and more. Do you start going chasing after the market long after it has run, or do you wait for the market crash 1929? Do we wait another 10 years to get involved? And my view is that technology and the way youngsters and millennials and Gen Zers are, they're just having a ball. There's a ton of money around. I think people are armed with a ton of money, and they're almost going to be treating these markets and stock markets like a casino. They're just playing. Everyone is playing with gay abandon, and they throw their money there. Tons of people are going to be burnt, but tons of people are going to make plenty of money. There are Bitcoin billionaires that have been made. A guy that I love, Gary Vaynerchuk. I remember him when I started watching him about 3-4 years ago, when I was sharing with chamber members, hey, we've got to be on these technologies. He, at that stage, I can't remember, he might have said that he had 10 years ago had purchased about $25,000 to $40,000 of Bitcoin, which was probably $1 per Bitcoin. Well, I'd hate to know how much he's worth right now. And he's the type of guy who actually kept those Bitcoin. And these people are turning around and saying, hey, this $39,000 is nothing per Bitcoin. This thing's heading to $100,000. What? And I haven't got one. So what are these social trends telling us? Social trends are telling me I'm excited about the future, but my goodness, whose boat do we get onto? And who do we follow? So I'm just leaving you with those thoughts. Do I know where these markets are going to go? I haven't got a clue, but it's blooming exciting at the moment to be alive.